you probably don't need anything. There's You don't need an entity to protect your napkin, or even a basic deck, or to do some preliminary customer research. Like, it's just an idea. You're just asking questions.
The first hurdle that usually comes up when somebody says, I want to start a business is, well, how do I start the business? What do I form? What do I do with my tax, accounting?
For anybody listening who hasn't done this, if you do not have separate finances for your business, take 7 minutes after this call. You can sign up for a Mercury account or some other business bank account.
I'm a firm believer, in the use case of using AI to understand better what you don't know so you could go figure it out, right?
You could be using AI tools for research or information input, but you really want that to be human-led decisions. That's the more strategic for your business.
You don't have a reason to feel like you're in the dark anymore, because it can help you to
Very much
navigate. I am very excited today to be joined by Evin Wick. Today, the problem that we're going to be talking about is one that every small business owner, startup founder, entrepreneur is going to face at some point, which is, how do I correctly structure my company, deal with all of the operational nuances and the everyday needs of my business? Specifically thinking about things like legal advice and formations of your company and bookkeeping, things of this nature. So very excited to explore that and how AI can begin to take the role as the front door advisor for those things. So Evin, who I'm joined with, is a tax lawyer turned FinTech builder and founder. His life work is around helping small businesses and startups accomplish their goals compliantly. That includes things like small business 401ks, startup accounting, full stack back office for solo professionals. We'll get into some of those details. But before that, I wanted to turn it over to Evin to introduce yourself. Tell us more about the problem space and your experience there.
Thanks. Really excited to be here and excited to be seeing you again. We miss you here in San Francisco, but
got to get back here soon.
To connect through the internets here. Certainly, I love DC and gonna make it there as well. So my background is in tax law and in FinTech, and throughout my career, you have seen problems where businesses coming from solopreneurs, startups, small business owners, basically are trying to balance, how do I get set up, do what I want in a compliant manner with a limited resource set. It's limited time, limited knowledge, limited money, and how to accomplish those goals expediently, balance those things with overall business priorities. That's where I spend a lot of time working and thinking, and AI is a tremendous tool for any of that. I should note here, anything I say or we say on this is certainly not tax or legal advice. I think it's going to be dependent on your own situation, educational purposes only. Really excited to be in here.
I think that's great. It is a great future cursor to some of the things that we'll get onto around AI and AI acting as your advisor and providing some of this feedback and how it relates to hallucinations and misinformation and things like that. So we'll put a pin in that for sure. But absolutely, right? This is meant to help to equip you with enough knowledge to go and ask the right questions. And I think that's one of the big themes that we're going to have in today's conversation, is knowing the right questions to ask so that you can go seek the answers for that. So we'll get to all that and more. So Yeah, let's just talk about the overarching challenge. We talked a little bit about it. I've been in the same position. It's the first hurdle that usually comes up when somebody says, I want to start a business is, well, how do I start the business? What do I form? What do I do with my tax accounting? How do I manage all of this? And I like that you said balancing it with other business priorities, because the other very important priority is, what's your customer pipeline? What's your opportunities? Where's your revenue, right? So you kind of have to think about it both ways, but you see people stuck on that first part a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that is the challenge. It's like where to start. And if you have great legal documents, but you don't have any customers, or you have customers and you're not serving them because you're working on really dialing down your legal stack, those probably aren't good uses of your time. So it really is some calculation and appropriate scale on what you're doing that's stage appropriate for that business. Like we probably seen various, like, is this an idea phase, napkin phase? You've got a business plan, a pitch deck, and through any of it, you probably don't need anything. You don't need an entity to protect your napkin, or even a basic deck, or to do some preliminary customer research. Like, it's just an idea. You're just asking questions, but at the same time, you can very much hit a tripping point the other way, where you're signing contracts and have an entity where you'd be exposing yourself to personal liability in that regard, or you're commingling business and personal funds, which creates just a massive headache. Pretty at the end of the year, but pretty immediately, you're going to lose sight of, what are my business expenses? Is this business making money, losing money? It becomes pretty hard to suss out. So absolutely, there are things that we can think of from the get-go that really help somebody run a better business. And it doesn't mean you need to do all compliance stuff before you do anything else. It has path and a gradient timeline. We could dig a little bit more into that, and happy to riff there. But you've started a few businesses along the way, but some of the things I think about, like, we go from this idea, I'm going to buy a restaurant and I'm going to turn it into this great thing, or I'm going to start this startup. Like, great, you got an idea, open up some documents, you share them with people. That's all good. Where do we start needing to get more compliance? And how do you know what you need then? It's one of the biggest challenges, and certainly there are tools to get you whatever it is that you need. But if you're pressing play on those tools without knowing what you're after, they can bring you to some pretty weird spots. I talked to a really smart person who trademarked the name of his consulting business. Not because his consulting business is a particularly innovative name, or because of anything really. Just he was going through you know, like a legal Zoom flow, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
trademark your business for extra protection. And
Mm-hmm.
that sounds good. That sounds like compliance. I'm trying to get set up right. I'll trademark it. You don't. There's no reason to do that. Spend the better part of $1,000 on something that you don't need, that doesn't make your business safer or better.
Mm-hmm.
For that person, they could have spent $1,000 on more outreach or better
Yeah.
tools to serve their customers. Instead, they spent it on trademarking the name of their consulting firm. So it's a place where you've got to know what you need to then pull some of those levers to
Mm-hmm.
get you there. I think it's two sets of tools
Mm-hmm.
in that regard.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think you said it a little earlier too. It's what you need and when you need it, right? Because you might not need it now, you might need it in the future, you might not even need it in the future. One of the things we were talking about earlier was splitting that challenge down. We talked about just really briefly the kind of three themes that I was taking from our prep conversation, which is the knowledge gap, the experience gap, and the financial gap, right? I think you hit on all three, right? The knowledge gap is, I don't know what I don't know. The experience gap is, I know, but I don't know when to put it at use, something like that. And the financial gap is, I don't have the money to afford an expert in all of
Yeah.
that,
I
right?
think these things are very much so. I think it's a summary of the three obstacles that people starting new businesses, we say starting new businesses, you know, that can, importantly, that can take different shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And the different shapes directly. What some of the answers to that is? Are you starting a company where you're planning to raise venture funding? Like that, that's a specific path. Are you starting, you know, a business of what? It's just going to be you, or are you starting something that's maybe a retail sales operation where you're going to have, you know, multiple employees and be operating with physical goods? Like, these are three very distinct paths, and the answer for any of these questions would be accordingly very different based on those paths. So sort of understanding what you as that person starting a new business is seeking to do. And yeah, you've done a nice articulation of this sort of experience gap, but how many reps can anyone get at starting up a business? One, you hope you don't get that many. In some ways, you hope that the business is successful and you're doing that for a long time. And even if you start another business, it might be in a different state, or it might be solo business versus startup versus small business. So you might have a very different sort of set of problems there. And certainly on the financial side, like these services are expensive, whether it's LegalZoom charging you better part of $1,000 to set up a trademark, or you're going out to a nice law firm and they're, you know, helping you set up things like that's, those fees add up tremendously quickly. And certainly on the startup side, many conversations with people who get excited about their idea, and rightfully so, it is a great idea, but get really sucked into the IP element of that early on. And that's a place where IP lawyers are very smart, very well-trained people who charge lots of money and appropriately.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
And so if you're building out a business, like, how do you weigh that, and when is the right time? Like, how limited is your capital to spend it there? If you're raising pre-seed money, do your investors want you spending that months of runway?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And even then there's so much more along with that, right? Do you have the money to fund a legal battle if you have your IP? It's easy to spend the money and think you're protecting yourself, but at the end of the day, you're really only protected as deep as your pockets support you, right? I've seen this problem. You hear it a lot. I think one example. So I did some real estate investing, and tenant doesn't pay, send them to collections. Everybody says send them to collections. It's like, well, you can't collect anything if they can't pay, or somebody stole this idea from you, sue them.
Right.
With what money, right? It seems so easy until you try to put it in practice. I think an example from my past is one of the businesses that we had tried to start was a kind of group think tank partnership. And, we put together, we got all excited. I think we filed through some online agency. I don't remember exactly the details of it, but I do remember that as things went by, 6 months later, we decided it wasn't working. So we had to dissolve the business, and we went to file the dissolution paperwork, and we got a letter back that basically stated you were never formed in the first place, right? You didn't file the right paperwork. So that was it. It's like we wasted probably $600 or $700 on that. We had a good lesson. So, thinking about that, and this was
$600-$700 means you got out pretty easy in the scheme of things.
Yeah, exactly. This was back in 2012. So when I think about that story and I think about where we are today, what's shifting this paradigm for new business owners and founders, resource-wise, tool-wise?
So I think one thing that first sort of shift, and it's largely occurred, is kind of double-sided. We can look at two areas here. The first we call the automation era. And that gets you somewhere faster. And that's being able to click through and complete a trademark application for your consulting firm. Or I've talked to multiple people out here in San Francisco who tell me that they have Delaware LLCs. And I kind of ask, why? And they tell me that it was easy to create. And, well, that's lovely, but you just sell coffee here, and now you have an additional state overhead burden. If you were on a website, and certainly Stripe Atlas has these tools and many others that make it really easy to stand up with Delaware LLC. But Delaware is important really for only two types of folks: those who are outside the U.S. and need to call somewhere home, in which case Delaware is a spot-on place to call home because it's good legal code and you need to call somewhere home. Or you're trying to raise venture capital, then the expectation you have a Delaware C Corp. But for everyone else, you need to be, I guess the third good reason is if your business is located in the state of Delaware, then you should have a Delaware entity. But for
that reason,
if you're selling coffee in the other 49 states or the District of Columbia, you do not need a Delaware entity. And so I think there's this prior generation of tools that basically got people somewhere faster. And didn't ask a lot of questions about, is this place that we got you to faster the place that you actually needed to go in the first place.
Yeah, or directionally correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Accelerate the process, but not provide guidance. So I think it does address a little bit of that with the financial constraint. You can now at lower cost do some of these things than by hiring a lawyer. So that's sort of the generation one. And I think we're now seeing products in generation two, and a lot of places where people can use AI tools to sort of, can you create a framework to ask the right questions and improve sort of knowledge gap. So if the first generation reduced some costs of getting to a specific outcome, if you can ask ChatGPT a little bit about your situation, you can come up with a framework that then lets you either go to a lawyer with a specific question or problem set, and just those answers, or have a better understanding of where you need to ultimately go and spend those funds. Where I do think you can sort of blend knowledge, resources, and certainly we create different compliance guides and checklists. Those starting new businesses, and those can copy and paste that into the ChatGPT, Claude, whatever your choice is, along with details about your own business, and you get some clearer next steps there that then allow you to have a lot more direction in who you're pursuing in terms of where you might need expertise or identifying gaps. Not coming to it from such a naive place, and maybe bridging a little bit of that experience gap. It doesn't necessarily make you give you training that you don't have, but it can maybe make up for a little bit of that experience.
It could give you some training, right? It could give you a lot of pointers of the things to look at.
Yeah.
Right.
So
a
friend of mine had LLC formation document that he got from the internet. He was saying because it's more, I don't know, that's not. I'm not looking. That's not my wheelhouse. And, focused on other things, but dump it into the AI. Ask it to review it. Tell it what type of business you have. He does, and it says you have. This document is for a multi-member Texas LLC, and you're trying to establish a single-member California LLC. You are miles on. See? In terms of that type of knowledge, you're not. The AI is probably better at reading your formation documents than you are. It's a fair assessment.
Yeah. I like to think about, we talked a little bit about this in previous podcasts. I'm a firm believer, in the use case of using AI to understand better what you don't know so you could go figure it out. Right? So
yeah,
if you think about the sides of the equation, there's two sides. There's the founder side, and then there's the expert side, right? And on the founder side, for all the things that we just said, you don't know the questions that you want to ask. You don't know what good and great look like, and you have limited funds, right? And then on the expert side, you are then caught in between a client who has limited funds, who's asking you for professional guidance, right? That you're going to have some liability for. They don't speak the same language as you. So you have to very quickly get out of them all of the necessary information. And they're probably going to stumble along the lines of giving that to you. And then you need to make decisions fast, cheap, and then put your name on it, right? So, with that in mind, the use case that I really like is, having AI as that front door to help guide you through, just to say like, let's get at the cursory stuff. This is a Texas thing. You're not in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Also say, here are my wants and needs and what I'm looking at. Provide me some guidance and help me frame this information for that professional.
Yeah, I think that's a very good framing. Do you use V0 at all?
I don't.
Okay, they've got a sort of a AI coding platform, and they've got sort of loop in there where they're using an AI to enhance your prompt to render better outcomes. And I think that's very useful and has applicability to what we're talking about, which is, how do you bridge that language gap between the words and terms normal person walks around and uses, where it might use, say, your company, but they actually, turns out that what they're trying to do is form a partnership. And how do we take some of that and use it to describe the actual needs and the questions a little more specifically? And to hit on something else, man, which is, and a lot of the time the experts don't know the answer. And the AI tools, they're using AI tools, and they've always been using tools to look up answers, and they have the training or the context to both know where to find the answer and know how to parse the answer, and also probably to understand if the answer they're seeing is a legitimate answer. Is this just a hallucination and imagination of an AI, or is this a real thing? And I think that can be where the knowledge occurs at. I do think a challenge that's a big one, which is how do legacy workflows, expertise, and business models you actually conformed to this new paradigm, whether we're going to see existing expertise providers reinvent their business, or are we going to see new businesses, new service models, new pricing models come in based around these AI tools? Happy to
that's
maybe there's a market wager on some of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. If you think about the spectrum between a legal Zoom and a expert on one hand, on the other, right? Self-service versus full service, right? Now, more and more of the knowledge is accessible, but the experience that comes along with it isn't. So are you going to see these experts have to start moving more towards the middle, where there's more self-service aspect, and then they're the ones who are validating it at the end, which I think with some of these self-service platforms, you can pay additionally to have somebody come in at the end of it. But, now we've democratized that capability to a ChatGPT Pro, or something like that, you could get a ton of stuff, especially once you start using deep research. A lot of information you can get. It's closing the knowledge gap.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's traditionally been a spectrum between like just a form that you can fill, hope for your best, to a full service expert. And yeah, I think we're going to see many more things in the middle there. And one thing that's nice about forms you can fill out is you can do it at your house on your schedule. First, you scheduling a time 2 weeks from now to go to somebody's office downtown. Very different. And so you will see, some of how you blend some of those benefits, not just from cost, but actually in sort of how services are provided. I think we'll see some different new products coming at that from both sides, both expansion of existing workflows, like products like LegalZoom or law firms becoming more innovative, but also new players.
Yeah. And that leads us into, you were sharing with me a framework that you like to think of things in traffic lights, right? Green, yellow, red. Green being AI alone. This is a great theme and use case for. Yellow being AI plus the human in the loop. And then red being you have to have a human in the loop. This is just too risky, too sophisticated. There's something there. Can you get into a little bit about that framework?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's, a lot of my experience has been in accounting. Spent time building accounting software. The big workflow that is not very interesting in basic bookkeeping is categorization of things. You spend money, and it is an expense of some type. Like that process is not very interesting. There's a lot of it. The individual dollar amounts are relatively low. So we can think of high frequency, low consequence. It's a great thing to just automate the hell out of, man. And you can get from to the mid 80s with this kind of rote rules. You start layering more AI models, you can get into the mid to high 90s there, which is great. Nobody really wants to think about is HubSpot software. HubSpot software, we know that. Then the less questions that need to work their way to a human, the better. Obviously, you need to have an AI or a set of automations that are functioning in a highly consistent manner. In that regard, it gets weird if you call Verizon software one month and utilities the next month. It's much better to just always call it software, but and better again if you call it utilities. But you can just the better that gets, just the better it is, and the better off everyone is. So again, consequence relatively low for frequency high, and the ambiguity is pretty low there as well. And then you can think of this sort of yellow light with some of the things we were talking about, of like human in the loop, the humanist reviewer step, where an AI drafting it is great. I can think of. There are a lot of things that meet that. I don't know. Maybe you had an AI draft some notes as to how I log into the podcast platform and what I should prepare, and you reviewed it. I mean, that's a perfectly normal thing to do, or an agreement that you might have for basic consulting, like first pass. It's just like starting from a template. Gets everybody there quicker, starting with some pretty normal inputs. So those are the sort of yellow, which is that the review and approve element, and that's both. Frequency is still reasonably, but it's not happening every minute, every hour, and the consequences are definitely higher. And then we could think of what are the truly like red things where you could be using AI tools for research or information input, but you really want that to be human-led decisions. And that's the more strategic work for your business, and it's very low frequency in terms of repetition, and very, very high consequence. So that's sort of the framework that I go. Even in that third stage, like we can use AI to research things, but you as a business leader, like, are really owning that decision, or bringing in an expert who's going to own that decision. You might think. We were talking earlier about entity formation, like what type of entity should you create? Where should you do that? Like, you can pull research, but ultimately those are high level decisions that you only need to make once.
Unless you messed up, and then you have to go back and hopefully now you got to pay to undo all of it and then pay again.
Yeah, man. Set up that Delaware LLC because it was easy. I just pay Delaware $300 a year now. 3 years running. It feels easier to just pay them than it does to like try and flip my entity back to California. Ouch. You're probably right in that. Like, see, making that thin conclusion, but
you know what, it definitely does feel that way. You made the mention of it's easier to fill out a form at home than have to schedule appointment 2 weeks out, but at the same point, I've definitely filled out what I thought were simple forms at home, and they would use some word that I'm not familiar with in that context. And then it just takes me down a rabbit hole by, what do you mean by this? Right? Especially when that word is asking for information that doesn't appear under that vocabulary anywhere else. So still, like, even doing the 1-page form at home, I could see that it's going to be stressful. It's interesting. I'm afraid I'll make a mistake. They're afraid they'll make a mistake, but then they went through and opened the company without any expert insight. This is an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, I mean it is, right? Like that we've to date like streamlined these action processes.
Mm-hmm.
Make it easier to sort of perform and get to the outcome, but don't address some of the rote things, but doesn't address the more strategic element of like,
Yeah.
do you need a Delaware LLC? Do you need to trademark the consulting business? Are these? So I think there's handheld holding through these processes in some ways, but it's not giving people the context they need to make a strong decision at the outset. And most cynically, you might think that who's offering a trademark upsell might not care deeply about professional context and might actually think it's okay if a few people trademark consulting shops that they didn't need because the margins are good on that product or something.
Yeah, a quick path to owing money, recurring money too. It's easy to make an LLC and then you owe $300 a year. Harder to dissolve it.
Yeah,
that's the cynical side of things. I mean, we don't have to dig too far into that. Let's get on the bright side. So, we've talked about the tools. We've talked about this democratization of of some level of knowledge, right? Not so much the expertise, right? So, and then that decreases that financial gap too. So how should founders and business owners really start thinking about things now when they have these tools at hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of another class of, we say, tools that we actually haven't necessarily touched on yet, but there are some better, or maybe we have a little bit, like there are just things like Mercury or other like great banking tools or new accounting systems that just make it easier to sign up and sort of just work when you do it. So I do think there's this other class of the levers that you can pull to get your business stack in place have also really improved, and it's worth calling some of that out as well. There's like what are the day zero things? For most people, like for anybody listening who hasn't done this, if you do not have separate finances for your business, take 7 minutes after this call. You can sign up for a Mercury account or some other business bank account if you're choosing. You can row. I don't care where you bank. I care that you have a separate business bank account, and that is going to make your life easier. The lives of whatever happens when you need to file a tax return for the business at the end of the year. These are pretty low consequence things. If you need to close that bank account, nobody's sad, nobody's mad at you. So that's sort of a step one. I think the next thing to think through is, and you could kick this up with a conversation in Claude or GPT or something. What are the compliance needs for this business at this stage, and where are you physically operating? Like, if you're not in the state of Delaware, you're not trying to raise venture money. probably don't need to be Delaware. You probably are in you have some physical location, and you have rules that apply to you in that physical location. So you need to sort of know what those are and be aware of it. And then you can start to figure out what are the requirements that you face given that physical nexus. What's your objective? So the things we talked about, are you trying to get venture funding, just operate this on your own? Are you doing things like selling physical goods? Are you hiring employees? All of those can bring you in different places. And then as you get sort of further down the path, you could think about like tax inputs. Like great, you're making money. You've got clients. Like how do you deal with this in a tax efficient way? So those are some of the sort of inputs that are available. And then I think once you sort of understand what type of business you're setting out to create, there are various strong tools that can be sort of good shops for some. There are lots of places who will help you set up a Delaware C Corp. Simply, you could start to string together tools to register your entity in your state. If you just need to run payroll, there's great payroll solutions, including Gusto is an easy one. We could talk about other things that you might want. I spend time at Guideline, 401k provider. You have a business, you want to for 401k. Like how do we? That 401k literally just a section of the tax code. So, how do you to learn as little as possible about that section and offer that? So, like, I think going to that toolkit, like if you identify that as the goal, you can find people who provide those solutions in a pretty clean way at this point. The sort of day zero is that business bank account. You set up some type of accounting thing. Certainly biased towards Puzzle, where I spent 2.5 years and think certainly for startups, it's the best accounting system around. But connect an accounting system to that business bank account, and you'll get easier from there. So those are some kind of start in place things, and then kick off that conversation with ChatGPT or Claude, telling what you're about. I'll also share it sort of a framework that we have. But those are some of the basics that I think can help a lot of people. Is like, do you have some basic legal protection that's registration in the state where you are? Or do you have separate finances and some bookkeeping? We talked earlier about like how some of this can be not a drag on your business, but really an accelerator. And I think these things are getting some of these basics really do act as that accelerator of innovation. Like having a business bank account is going to make it easier to say, invoice clients, get paid. And then being able to understand, like, are you making money? Who are your profitable clients? These are things that are important for your business and are very, very difficult to do without those sort of initial compliance steps. The business entity side can be some of the same as far as are you working with clients who maybe are not comfortable hiring you as an individual without a business entity. The quicker you can understand that and then action that need, then you can pursue those clients. And certainly, so I think there can be a level of professionalism around entity formation, in addition to liability limitations and the more common reasons people pursue those.
And I think one of the things that's worth saying and calling out, and I bring this up in a lot of conversations because I do it myself. When we talked about in this conversation as well, you don't know what you don't know. And no longer does that have to hold you back, right? You were talking about doing some of these fundamental things, helping use ChatGPT or something like that to figure out where you're going, or the answers to help you get to where you're going. But it's what I was saying, it was worth repeating. If you aren't sure even what to ask or where you're going, you could ask that too. And I think that's the biggest change now, because you used to have to rely on that expert to probe the questions and help you think through some of the further down the road things. But now you could even say, I'm not sure, what do I need to think about in thinking about this? And then come back and say, oh, that's a great point. When do trademarks matter for me? And it can come back and say, okay, so here's, it's almost, you don't have a reason to feel like you're in the dark anymore, because it can help you to
Very
find
much
and navigate.
And I think you're not limited to using somebody else's checklist, right? You need to be in the situation where you're playing off somebody the wrong playbook. Like with AI, you can provide some basic information, what your business is doing, and some pretty clear thinking around, am I the type of business that needs to be registering trademarks? You'll get some, we could do this in near real time for anybody listening. Go in and see, like, is your business the type that needs to be registering trademarks? Like, it's a good starting place.
Yeah. And then you could move forward or move on to think about, well, what's your customer ICP? And if you don't know that, AI can help you with that too. It's almost like it's AI all the way down.
Yeah. I mean, I think you don't know your ICP. Let's prioritize that one ahead of the trademarks. But, absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to give you an opportunity, any closing thoughts on the topic, and then tell us a little bit about what you're doing to tackle the problem.
Absolutely, AJ. I foremost, this has been a lot of fun. Wait, I do have a little bit of a fun game I was hoping we could play here.
Sure.
Before we do that, I have a little bit of a quiz for you.
Oh dear. Okay, let's go.
Each of these is true fact. So, Shopify tax solution makes you 100% compliant.
False. Fiction.
You're right. I mean, I think Shopify and Stripe tax are good, but they're imperfect. Imperfect things for sure. Around the edges, like they don't know the detail. Certainly they're good at math, but in terms of knowing the details of your business. They can only do what they know.
Mm-hmm.
An LLC means that you avoid payroll tax.
For yourself or for your employees? Or at all, in general? I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to say that's not the case at all.
You're right, man. You are 2-0 here.
I messed up a lot.
Do not do anything to avoid payroll taxes. You're going to be paying both sides, both the employer and the employee side as an LLC.
All right, let's keep them coming.
Yeah, let's Pilot's bookkeeping solution is, or any bookkeeping is true autopilot.
Oh, no, not in my experience.
What was your experience?
There's just a lot of manual hand holding still, right? Especially with categorizing, you have to deal with that. Making sure the expenses were coming in right, doing payroll and getting that out right, filing the forms. I mean, yeah, it gave me a pretty little thing that I printed out and sent over to my accountant.
Let's try one more here.
Yeah, one more.
Just for the ChatGPT knows every up-to-date state law.
Ooh, okay. Nose is the wild card in this. Maybe it doesn't mean it's going to give it to you.
Can I hand it to you? You are too good at this. Yes, I think could find the law, possibly, but we were even looking at some NAICS tables, and working with an AI that kept pulling from the table from 6 years ago, not the more recent table, and pulling the wrong classifications. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's why we kept saying it's a trust but verify mechanism, right? Don't use it for the answer. Use it to be dangerous enough to know what questions you need to ask. That's the experience gap.
Absolutely. Very quickly, in terms of what we're building at S-Works, we are a full stack AI back office for solo professionals. Solo professionals can set up S-Corps, which can have very positive tax outcomes. And there's a number of things you need to do once setting up that S-Corp in terms of payroll, bookkeeping, taxes, and we handle all of that for you. We have a heavily AI-driven and automated workflow, which enables our team, our customer-facing team, to really have superpowers versus the way some other people have set up historically, which can leave users feel anonymous. Anybody working with us has a dedicated client accounting partner, and then essentially we're supervising all the automations on their behalf. So if anybody's interested, please shoot me a message and would happily tell you more about it.
Amazing. And we'll put some links in the comments. So this has been great. I think it's been super helpful. You know, my biggest takeaway, and I literally keep a label taped to my monitor on this. It says, can AI help with this? Right? I think one of the biggest things that people need to think about is it's not 2012 anymore. AI can really, really help you figure out your way around.
Yeah,
and prevent you from making these big mistakes.
Yeah, I think you've got really easy access to another voice, a smart voice that you can go right out to, and before you before you pull the trigger on that
Mhm.
Delaware LLC, uh, before you sign that contract without an entity in place, you ask around. Is this a good idea?
Yeah.
And you might get some good feedback there.
Yeah. And we'll close with saying that please don't just trust the AI to give you the answer. And also, don't take this as us saying you should just use AI and that's going to make your life 100% easier, because we're not
To
doing
get
that.
you 100%, but it is going to make your life easier, and it's going to mean when you pull in, pick the experts, you're going to do so more efficiently and get more value out of them.
And that's the key there. Both sides, that equation from the beginning, I think both sides are going to be able to accelerate the value they receive, the value that they provide. That's the new economy that we're going to see, right? Experts will be able to deliver more for less. I don't know if they want to do that, but they will be able to deliver more for less.
Some of them very much do not want to do that, but
Yeah.
it is absolutely going to be possible. So yeah, it does not work with everyone's business model, that's for sure.
For sure. All right. Well, it was a pleasure to have you on. Yeah. Wonderful. Talk to you later.
Be well.